Hello, welcome sunflowers to Good Journeys Tarot. It is our weekly live 78 cards in 78 weeks in which I talk about the card I'm currently studying and working on drafting in my own little tarot deck here. And I have been very fortunate to have guests for all of these recently. And that's going to continue. At the end of this broadcast, I'll tell you about all of our guests coming in December all the way through New Year's and how you can get involved. Today's card is the Eight of Cups. And this is a card that to me is kind of fundamental for this journey that I'm on, as it does represent journeys and finding our truth or our home and letting go of the things that don't serve us. And so I feel like it needs to be just right. I don't think I'm there yet, but hopefully I will get closer as we talk today. My guest today, interestingly enough, was the user that got randomly drawn on my tarot advent calendar over on Instagram this morning. And so, and honestly, it was completely random. I had like a whole bunch of names in a bucket, and that one just happened to end up in day one. So check that out on Instagram if you haven't seen it, and help me in welcoming Jonathan Dailey.
Hello,
Welcome.
everyone. Hi, Tony.
Hi, oh, yeah. Tony is here without fail almost every week. In fact, she'll be here in 2 weeks to help us with whatever card that ends up being. So excited about that. And this is your first time here.
Yes.
So welcome. Glad to have you. All the way from Hawaii. In fact, you and Tony have something in common in that this time frame only works now that we've changed our time again, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I wish we would stop
Hawaii doesn't do daylight savings.
Right.
So we went from a 6-hour difference between us to a 5-hour difference. So your show now starts at my 8 a.m. instead of my 7 a.m.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, let me just flip over here and see. Yeah, Tony is here. Welcome. And I see some other people. Oh, there's Tarot Stash popping in to say hello. And as others pop in, I'll say hello as well. But for now, why don't we get started looking at our card of the week, which again is the Eight of Cups, if you're just tuning in. And the way this works is usually we will start sharing some of our favorite versions of the card and talking about why we like them, and then we'll add to the information about the card as we go along. Many decks do kind of follow the idea of the Smith-Wade of walking away from the cups and going up the hill. And I've got a couple examples here, like that this might hurt. In this one, the cups are broken. That's actually a step away from the Smith-Wade, in which they're all nice, neatly stacked, intact. We usually see the broken cups in the 5. Here is the Mystical Manga, which I almost never pull because it's an RWS clone, basically. And
Right.
but it's a gorgeous deck.
Oh, it's interesting with the moon having a face there.
Yes, that was some, and there's a lot of play with that in different decks, and I want to talk about that moon in a little while. But this is the Defector, which is the SKT version, which does an interesting thing with the moon as well, where she used the squared circle as this idea of your great work or that thing that you're seeking. And she also uses that ibis from the star card, which we will talk about when we get to my version of the card, because it was something that Tony brought up in our Good Journeys into Tarot group. What kind of cards did you pull for us?
Well, just to show you a couple of the RWS clones, Super Lunaris has got to be one of my favorites. And I love it in this card. The person's walking away through a field of wheat instead of up a mountain. Mm-hmm. And the Mystic Palette Tarot by Chiro Marchetti. It's interesting because she's walking away across the waves and her cups are just sinking into the water.
Okay. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And then a surprise favorite of mine is Trash Panda Tarot. I don't know, there's just something about like I just got it because I like raccoons and I thought, oh, it'd be kind of cute, whatever. But I find even though it's like cutesy, it works really well. And their cups are actually grape sodas. So I love that here they're not alone, right? The cans of grape soda are lined up just like the cups, but they have this little sea otter that they're talking to. The raccoon and the sea otter are chatting about life, I guess. So.
Interesting. It's unusual to see two people or two individuals in a card. In fact, a lot of decks, in order to make things a little more neutral, will take the people out altogether. Like in the Spacious Tarot, we see the cups going up the hill, or even in the Lily White, which is a deck I love, the cups going up the staircase there, which is gorgeous.
I'm still pulling them. I had them like I sorted, but I put them all back in the boxes, so I'm still opening things. Here's another new one that's a very interesting deck. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to use it just because it's very intriguing. Monsoon.
Okay.
It just came out pretty recently, and it's it's 8 of water on here, and it's right. Instead of cups, we have a broken bed. That's on. That's also a fireplace or something, and a tree with a key growing through, right?
Yeah.
And then is that a giant bale, or maybe maybe they just put their sheet over their head and they're walking away now, trying to find a new bed.
Interesting. Welcome, Stephanie. The Light Seers uses also that beach idea, but they're singing bowls instead of cups in this deck, which are kind of an interesting idea. It's pretty. But I also have a lot of cards that like go away, like do depictions differently than the Smith way, walking away and whatnot. Like in the Penumbra Tarot by Ethany, they're actually throwing away the cups, letting go of the cups, the things they don't need, versus journeying away from them. And different kind of journey in the Rider Waite. Gonna take that car, and they even went so far as to make the license plate "See You Later" L8R.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I have an interesting one, "The Muse" by Chris Ann. It's interesting because instead of cups, it's emotions in here, and almost all the emotion cards are very watery with flow of water and cups and everything. But the 8 of emotions is a dry desert with no water in sight.
Wow. Yeah. I actually just rehomed that deck. I've just never been able to work with it. I enjoyed the images, but it just wasn't something that clicked for me. And I was like, I'm never going to work with it regularly.
Yeah.
This one is a little bit more positive card. The 8 of Cups from the Pocket of Peers is Mitchell Osborne, reflecting on paths. And every time I post this card, he reminds me the name of the cat. I think it's Bartolomeo or something. Bartolomeo, maybe. And I hate that I forgot to check it out because he's like, yes, me and the cat. For those who don't know, he's a pet psychic, so it's important for him that the cat is there as well. But he reflected in the guidebook for this deck about paths that we go down and looking back at those paths and that type of thing, which is one idea that people, I think, get with this card sometimes. But a lot of them choose to focus instead of kind of the emotional uncomfortableness that happens with deciding to move on. Which is why in the Thoth-based decks, it's called indolence, or in the case of this one, ennui in the Lost Hollow Tarot.
Oh, yeah.
That emotion that kind of overwhelms you as you kind of make that decision to leave something that actually may or may not even be bad. It could have good aspects, but it just no longer serves you.
No longer serves. Well, and that's interesting because here in the Tarot of Curious Creatures, the 8 of Cups is this giraffe girl, but if you look closely, she's got strings attached to the cups still.
All right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, are you going to let go of those cups and walk away, or are you going to drag them along behind you? And
Yeah.
it's interesting that they're on a beach too.
Yeah. And that's something that in the Brimstone and Earthflesh they do too. That looking back about where you came from. You know you've got to move forward and go on, but there are aspects of it that you're always going to miss. Um, but then others are really emotional. Like here's the Modern Love Tarot, which they're
Hmm.
depicting, basically the ending of a relationship and having to move physically to a new location. Or in the Sosorabito, where you just finally chop off all your hair. I've always loved this image for the Eight of Cups. To me, it just really captures that kind of like, oh, I'm done, I'm over. Let's go a different direction, kind of thing.
Right. That's
And
kind of, for me, the Ma'at Tarot. The Eight of Cups in this is just like, she's got her crow, she's got her walking stick, she's got her cloak, and she's off into the woods, and let's leave those cups behind. And it's interesting because this one has new moon in Gemini.
okay, yeah, it's interesting that different decks will have different associations.
Mhm.
Um, the Terror of the Holy Light actually has completely different associations than any other tarot I've seen. But most actually will call this one Saturn in Pisces.
Saturn and Pisces, yeah. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
see that in the um, mystical palette. There's
yeah, yeah,
Saturn and Pisces.
yeah.
And I had another one that had the symbolism on it. I've got a lot of decks.
Sure, sure, not a problem. I only have one more card because I kind of rushed through them, didn't I?
It's okay. I got
um,
plenty to share, so.
Oh, cool. Let's look at them then. I actually, the last one is the Numinous Tarot, and
Mhm. That's
you,
another deck I almost pulled out. Pretty much every deck you mentioned is one I was thinking about pulling out.
yeah.
I love it.
This one actually reminds me of me. Like this is a moment is described in the guidebook of deciding there's too much going on at this
Mhm.
party and like sneaking away quietly so no one notices, and so you still see the fun and the party in the background, but this person leaving
The
because
person.
even though it's a good thing, it just wasn't the right space for them at the time. They were overwhelmed with all of the good things and wanted to get away. And I'm guilty of that. I like sneak out of parties. I used to sneak out of parties all the time. Like, yeah, this just isn't working for me today. Let me go hermit, which which interestingly is a card that in a lot of books will relate this card to. And
Mhm.
the idea of this is the journey. The person is finally leaving something behind
Right.
to go up that mountain. The
Well,
hermit.
and it's also
Yeah.
the strength, right? Having the strength to leave behind
Yes,
the things that you're connected to. Right?
absolutely. That's another one that comes up a lot.
So, Cosmic Visions Tarot is definitely one of my all-time favorite decks, and the Eight of Cups here. I love how she just spreads her dragonfly wings and takes off.
Okay, cool.
And I love this deck because it's all black and white, but there's always that element of a rainbow in there. So here, the
Yeah,
rainbow is
cool.
the spilled cups. Um, let's see. I'm gonna try and skip past the ones that are too RWS.
Oh, no
I'm
problem.
saving one specifically for when you want to talk about reversals.
Oh, sure. Yes, we'll do that for sure. Jane the Seeker's popped in. Welcome, Jane. So glad to have you
Um,
here.
this one's interesting. The I just got this deck, Dream Visions Tarot. It's the second edition,
Mhm.
and this one it's very ethereal, right? And the cups are so perfectly stacked, but at the same time, they're almost not real.
Yeah. Yeah, I kept putting the first edition in my Etsy cart and taking it out and putting it in and taking it out. But I really didn't care for the second. I didn't like the second edition as much as the first, so I've
Oh,
never ended up
yeah, I
with that
never.
deck.
I just backed the second edition because I did the same thing where I wanted the first edition, kept having it hawing, and then it wasn't there anymore. And then I'm like, oh, there's a second edition. I'm gonna back it.
Right.
All right. So another interesting deck. I don't know if you have White Fly Tarot.
Not heard that one.
It's like she's walking away, but she's also leaving her tambourine behind.
Oh, wow.
Right. Leave the music, just like the what you were talking about, right? Is there anything else here that's a little less? Oh yeah, this is my Tarot of Oneness. This has got to be one of my favorite Eight of Cups I've ever seen, and it's all about cutting the ties, cut those strings, right?
Yeah, that's cool. I want to say I've seen that deck. It's not one that I own, but
Tarot of Oneness.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to be interviewing the creator on Tuesday.
So. Okay, all right, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a very pretty deck. I don't know if you know Jamie Sawyer's Out of Hand tarot.
Yes, I do. I didn't grab it because the card stock is the same as the Pocket of Peers, which I struggle with. So, but I'm tempted. I'm so tempted to grab it.
So this is a similar idea where it's like you're getting put in the place of the archetype, right? So this is you cutting the ties,
right?
Which I really appreciate. The only card we're like seeing from the point of view of the person that's a little hard in here is the Tower, because you're seeing it from the point of view of someone who's falling. So you see your feet in the air, and behind your feet you see someone else falling, and like the tower in the distance, and as you're falling backwards from it. So
oh, cool.
Yeah. So people, I know certain people can't handle like people falling out of the tower, so this would be even worse because you are the person falling out of the tower.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's see. I think I pretty much showed most of what I wanted to show. I have a few others here, but most of them are, like I said, they're all the clones, right? Like Smoke, Ash, and Embers here. We have a little water dragon, and the cups are acorn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the dragons for each suit are a specific type of dragon. In this case, the cups are like these amphibious dragons.
Okay.
It's like, oh, the cups are empty. I'm going to go look for some more acorns.
Awesome. So this is a card which, as I've been studying, I find that there are lots of different connotations from different people for. Weight and traditional Tarot de Marseille are very similar in that they kind of look at this as a positive, like good thing. In fact, he says, it's interesting. His description is one thing, but then what he says about it is completely different. But he says a man of dejected aspect is deserting the cups of his felicity, enterprise, undertaking, or previous concern. But then he says, the card speaks for itself on the surface, but other readings are entirely antithetical. And then he talks about it being about joy and about honor and about that timidity. We talked about needing strength to move on.
Mm-hmm.
He says it's usually found the card to be the decline of a matter, or that the matter which has been thought to be important is really slight consequence, either good or evil. And then in reverse, it's about joy, happiness, and feasting. And in the TDM, Caitlin Matthews talks about how this card is associated with visiting family. And normal, like the people that I've read about, they'll talk about how in the reverse, this could be about going back home. And so those are some aspects that are common. But then we get Crowley, who's like totally different. He sees this all about the negative aspect, and that idea that instead of overindulging, you're actually doing doing nothing. He calls it indolence, or your power's at idle, right? So like you're not actually doing anything with what you have. So it's that idea of that bittersweet moment, right? In your journey of moving on. And
Can I interject here real quick?
Sure, go right ahead. I was just
So,
trying to find
tarot
it.
of opposites. I just wanted to show this real quick since we're talking about reversals and like the different
Mhm.
ideas. Tarot of opposites, you get both positive and negative, right?
Oh,
So the positive
interesting.
here is you're dropping the key, you're walking away, you're done. It's a sunny day, you're over it. And then the opposite is it's raining, your cups are overflowing even though they're cracked, and you're clutching that key and coming back, right? Like you can't let go. And it's
Right.
overwhelming and right versus, finally you can let go and walk away.
Right. Absolutely. The Golden Dog called it the Lord of Abandoned Success, which lends itself to the ideas that both Wade and Crawley talked about a little bit. That idea that we were having success, things were good, but we felt like it's time to move on. Um, how do you think of eights in the tarot?
Eights are, for me, they're a little bit about stagnation. Um, that it's that feeling of being stuck. Like all the eights, if you notice, except for the wands, which are just like, whoosh, right? Everything else is about being stuck. Like the Eight of Pentacles is like doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over until you master it, right? Eight of Swords is like, I can't see. I'm like so caught up in my own thoughts, I can't move. And then the Eight of Cups is more about like feeling emotional stagnation, like you've given all you can and there's no more to give and you're just kind of done at that point. You need to withdraw, go back into yourself, or move on to leave behind what no longer serves and continue on your journey looking for that ninth cup.
Okay. Yeah, I've never thought about it as stagnation. I'll have to consider that. So for me, I've always thought about all of the eights as movement or lack thereof. Like so, like with the swords, it's your lack of movement, right? You've got
Mhm.
to you need to realize that you can act.
Right,
And then of course the wands obviously are all about movement, that swift
right,
movement
that
that's
whoosh.
usually depicted. And then in the eights, that movement of perfecting your craft, and becoming a master and even though you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're getting better with each one.
Right.
At least that's my idea of it. And
Or at
then
the
in
same
this
time,
one,
repeating the
you're
same
moving from
action feels
and
stagnant.
then yeah, and this one is more about your movement from emotionally, right? Letting go of those
Mhm.
things that weren't serving you, kind of thing. But Benabel Wynn calls this manifestation. So like this is she's like this is your where you're displaying your personal power or not displaying your personal power in the eights, and which I guess makes a little bit of sense in the sense that I was talking about movement. It's kind of the same thing with
Mhm.
manifestation. Either you're creating something or you're not creating something. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of different interesting perspectives on
I
what
can see
eights
the
actually are.
manifestation aspect,
Yeah.
definitely.
So let's talk about the moon in this card real quick because nobody seems to agree on what this moon is. Um, some people think it's the crescent moon and the full
Mhm.
moon, and then some people think it is a lunar eclipse, that's the moon and the
Right. And
sun.
here's the lunar eclipse right there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I get
Yeah.
that. And then one thing I didn't share with you is the Curious Travels.
Uh-huh.
I pulled that out because travel is right, traveling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then with that one, it's definitely a crescent, but the crescent moon
Right.
is looking down on the
Right.
person walking away.
Yeah.
And if you notice in this one, the person is that missing cup.
Okay. Went to yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah,
So
I
that's
actually usually pull from that deck, but I was trying to pull from different decks this week and didn't grab that one. And so that's why, and it actually to me looks like a crescent in this version.
yes, definitely.
Um, and then in others, it does look like an eclipse. Um,
Well,
well, a lot of mine actually leave the moon out, which is actually kind
yeah,
of
there's a few here that
cool.
don't have the moon at
That was a
all.
crescent.
Right.
Yeah, most of them do appear to be a crescent with a
Huh.
face in it. And so, but yeah, a lot of people, Jane, do say it's an eclipse, though Crowley never said anything. And so, I mean, not Crowley,
Well,
Waite never said anything about the moon in the card. It was something that perhaps Pixie added, like she did with a lot of cards as
right.
she was creating them. And in the Secrets of the Smith Waite, they talk about how during the time frame she would have been creating this, there was a lunar eclipse in England at that time, viewable
Oh,
from where she was.
mhm.
And so that might be what it is. But whether you look at it as, say, the waning crescent or an eclipse, it still has that transition energy, right?
Right.
There's still that aspect of
Oh,
cycles,
that's interesting.
perhaps coming to an end and moving on to the next thing.
The
Um,
Ash Panda has a full moon.
right, yeah. But either way, that moon is always a reminder of cycles, right? And
Right.
of moving on. And I think that's why it's important in the card that in many of them, there's that aspect of looking back. Because
Right.
if we don't look back at where we're coming from, then we are going to make that same mistake again,
Hmm.
kind of thing. Um,
Well, that explains the strings attached to the cups in the Tarot of Curious Creatures here.
yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Like you're gonna walk away, but some of those cups are gonna follow you, whether you want them to or not, because you're technically tied to them. Like I don't know if you can see, but like the strings go. It's like it's almost like she's holding the strings, but at the same time, they're part of her bow on her dress.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
That
and
is
here you
really
have
interesting.
dawn. You have the sun trying to rise instead of moon.
Yeah,
A new dawn.
interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a card of transitions. A lot of people often will refer to it as letting go or moving on and that type of thing. But it's also been associated by a lot of people with pilgrimages, your spiritual path and journey,
Mhm.
or finding a home. Because this last place didn't work out, perhaps the next one will. Um, but in reverse, there are lots of different ideas. Rachel Pollack herself gave three different ideas of alternate readings of the reversal. Of course, the
Mhm.
one being what Wade had to say about it being joy and happiness, that kind of returning home in a good way, where there's comfort and joy and that type of thing. But then alternately, some people will see it as that kind of stagnation, that kind of timidity, unwilling to move on for whatever reason, or being unable to move on. But then there's that third aspect that, you don't need to go anywhere. Everything's fine the way it is.
Right.
And so it can be very different, I guess, depending on what cards are around it and that type of thing. But like Jane said, she's embracing the card. Um, I feel like this card is kind of the epitome of what I've been trying to accomplish with my deck, and so I'm very concerned that I haven't done it justice yet. So we've been playing with it all week in the Good Journeys into Tarot group, and Tony, as always, gave me some great feedback. So I'm going to share real quick about the card that I ended up with
Oh,
after
I'm
all
looking
of my
forward to it.
study. My dogs have decided they're done hanging out. I think they went downstairs. This was the card that I created when I was doing my photo a day tarot deck, which was just a photo manipulation of a path I was going down that day, and thought, oh, that could be the Eight of Cups, the path, right? That journey that we're going on, kind of thing. And so that was kind of my original first thought, was the journey, which this is basically the namesake of my channel, Good Journeys Tarot. And but then when I started studying it, I mean, my first thought was burning bridges, and I immediately thought about the bridge that was in my Five of Cups. My Five of Cups was one of the first cards I did, and I haven't looked at it. I've looked at it several times since to update it and whatnot. But the idea for me was that this person has burnt that bridge, where they came from, where they felt lost, and as they've going to that new place, they're now burning that bridge and letting it go. They're finally putting it behind them. There's no way back to that difficult place. And so I started out with this image, but I didn't like the proportions of the person and all of that. And then I thought, well, if it's going to be this bridge, then I need to flip it, because it needs to be going. I want it to going the same direction, but also I wanted her walking away from the bridge. So like, instead of going over the bridge and keep going, she's actually going in a different direction from which she came. And so this was the image that we talked about online, and Tony's comment, and several people agreed with her, was that they didn't like how I reversed the moon in this image compared to the first image.
Yeah.
And but my thought was, one, to me, it's more reminiscent of the Smith Way, in which it's a waning crescent, at least in the northern hemisphere, which is where I've always lived. And so I kind of like the idea that it would do that. But I also like that idea of connecting with the past and remembering to look back so we don't make the same mistakes. We can look back and say, yeah, we burned that bridge. We don't want to do that again.
Right. Kind of thing. Done that.
And so that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. But I feel like this doesn't quite do what I want to with the card. And so I may end up changing it. I did tweak the fire a little bit from the previous image, and this is the current final version of the card. But I don't know that it will stay. We'll have to wait and see. Like I've said with all of mine, as I look at all of them together, there'll be adjustments and changes, because I've been trying to treat each one individually as a scene or a moment from my life. And this is very much like the description of this card that Cassandra Snow gives in Queering the Tarot, where, we, as LGBT people, put a lot of things behind them and have to move on a lot in their life because of the, people around them, right? And whether they accept them or not. And that's a lot of where this was coming from. A lot of that was in my 5 of Cups. And this really represents that point where I moved on, and I decided to let go of those bridges, right? And that's why I did the burning bridge of letting go kind of idea for me. And you'll notice that in my 5 it was a man, and now it's a woman, which that was kind of my transition, right? From before to now, so to speak. And so I liked all of those aspects, but I'm still not sure this is going to be the final image. Anyway, if anybody has any thoughts about it, do let me know, as well as yourself. I like getting feedback.
I'm just taking it all in. Yeah, I do. The one thing for me that a lot of these cards, not all of them, but quite a few of them have, is like the person's following a trail, right? Not all of them have that. I mean, like, she's just sitting on a wave here, so there's no trail on a wave. That's the only thing that jumped out at me. It's like, well, where's the trail? That's the only thing that kind of popped out at me.
Interesting that you say that, because I do have a path that I've been using in many of the cards, and that's one of the things that I keep thinking is missing, is the road that leads from the bridge to the city. And this as well. Yeah, so I agree. That's something I might look at. Although I'm also concerned with getting too many things going on in the cards. Because some of the cards are, to me, very simple, and some of them are overly complex in my depiction. So as I'm working through them in April, May, and June, I'll be working through getting them all more aligned and like they look like they go together,
Right. Yeah.
rather than just doing individual cards. Because I really like decks that like are connected and cohesive. I
Mhm.
don't tend to do back collaborative decks for that reason because I don't want a whole bunch of images that are so different
Right.
in a
It's
deck
like
for me anyway. That's just how I am.
no, it's true. I mean, I did end up getting the ETA Tarot, which is the um, emerging Toronto artists. And the only thing with that one is I find even though the art, each card is made by a different artist, at least it kind of flows together pretty well, mostly. But I mean, that's one of the reasons why I finally backed one of those 78 decks, and it was the 78 Magical. Um, Other than that, I mean, yeah, I don't do well when it's a mishmash of art. It has to, if it's going to be different artists, at least it's got to like flow together pretty well and like not match, but like at least feel like they're from the same deck.
Right.
Hmm.
And I actually do have one collaborative deck, and it was actually purchased for a completely different reason. It's the Sex Positive Tarot from out of Rome, and I actually feel like most of those go together. Like the artwork seems to kind of mesh. I don't know if it's because they kind of agreed on a color palette that they used, even though they're different artists doing the cards, or what the case may be. I keep meaning to do a walkthrough of that deck over on my alternate channel, um, Good Journeys After Dark. Um, while I'm shuffling, why don't you let us know what's coming up for you and your channel? I've just shared
Um,
it in the chat. Um,
oh, thank you. So,
yeah.
like I said, on Tuesday, I will be interviewing Robin Boise. I can never remember her last name. Um, this deck was a Kickstarter as well. I do a lot of Kickstarters, and it just recently came. I mean, I only got it a week and a half ago, I want to say.
Okay.
Um, and then a few hours after I'm done with that interview, I will be actually appearing on Tarot Stash with Gerald and my friend medium Betsy Palmer for some readings. And then I think that's it for next week. And then the first week of December, who am I talking to? I can't remember off the top of my head. But then I have, instead of deck interviews in December, I'm actually going to be doing a couple of book interviews. I have one here. The other one is not handy. But speaking of Journey of the White Bear by Robin Youngblood. Path to the Center of Your Shaman's Heart. She is a shaman herself, and she's let's see, she's been a member of the Seven Generations World Wisdom Council. She's a founding member of Grandmother's Circle of the Earth, and a founding member of the Sacred Earth Council. And then the week after that, I will be interviewing my friend Jenna Matlin, who just came out with her own book via Llewellyn, and that's Give Me a Tarot Reading.
Yeah, I just saw the launch of that she did over the course of the whole day with various people. All right. Well, we have 16 cards left, but only 15 that we're pulling from right now because one already is scheduled for a special event I'll mention shortly.
Ooh,
Why don't you pick a number? It'll make it easier rather than trying to shuffle and cut
I will pick
15
seven.
cards. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4,
No,
5,
it said
6,
eight.
7. All right. And it is the Knight of Wands.
Ooh,
So the Knight of Wands will be the card for this coming week. And I will actually be with my friend and mentor, Laura Perry, creator of the Minoan Tarot from Schiffer. And we will be working with this card. So I'll message her shortly and let her know what her card is.
awesome.
Also coming up in December, we have Tony from Antoinette Intuitive Tarot and Jewelry on the 11th. On the 18th, I will be with Amber Highland, editor of the Cartomancer, which I'm trying to show right now. The winter edition is currently available. If anyone would like to grab that, my article, The Privilege of Tarot, will be in it. So I would love some feedback on either of my articles I wrote this year if anybody happens to check them out. And then I think we won't do one Christmas Day. But I'm going to go ahead and do one New Year's Day because I don't want to skip 2 weeks. We're just too close to getting this done to be skipping all these weeks. And so New Year's Day, we'll actually do the sun because I feel like we should start the year on a happy note. And also, I finished this card years ago. It was the first card that I ever did. I was sitting playing with the RWS trying to learn it. And I had this spark of inspiration in my mind as to what this card should be. And for me personally, and thought, maybe I could do a whole deck like that. And that's how this all started 15 years ago. And so I'm inviting people from my Facebook group. Anybody who hasn't already joined can do so at the link that I have highlighted at the top of the page there. Good Journeys into Tarot to come on. And so hopefully there'll be a group of us on New Year's Day to talk about the sun and some of our favorite cards. And you're welcome to join us as well. And hopefully that'll be fun to just chat with friends on as a group on the first day of the year about a happy card, right? And then on January 8th, because I've already booked it, Jamie Sawyer will be here. So glad to have her hopping on board and joining us. And if you're in the Good Journeys into Tarot Facebook group, you have already seen the available dates for the spring. We are fast approaching the end. We will be finished April the 2nd with the series. So I want to thank everybody who stopped by today. I want to thank Jonathan for being here. I think he just lost his connection. So I'll touch base with him via IM. Until next time, everybody, good journeys.